Okay, let's dive right into this one because we are looking at what is arguably one of the most fascinating electoral upheavals in modern history. We're talking about how a 59-year-old political duopoly in Tamil Nadu was dismantled practically overnight in the 2026 Assembly elections. Welcome to this explainer. If we treat this election like a cinematic heist, and honestly, we kind of have to, the headlines really only tell us who walked away with the crown. But the raw math, the actual underlying data, well, that tells a completely different story of how the vault was actually cracked. So let's start with the first major clue in our electoral crime scene, 85.1%. That was the historic voter turnout, literally the highest in the state's entire history. On the surface, this massive number seems pretty straightforward, right? Politicians immediately pointed to it as undeniable proof of a great democratic awakening, basically claiming it was a tidal wave of previously disengaged voters rushing to the booths to demand change. And the immediate aftermath absolutely reflected that feeling of a tidal wave. Actor CM Joseph Vijay's brand new party, TVK, completely shattered a decades-old binary. Think about it. For nearly 60 years, power in Fort St. George essentially just bounced strictly between two heavyweights, the DMK and the AIADMK. And just like that, the streak is officially broken. But to figure out exactly how a 2-year-old party managed to pull off the ultimate political upset, we really need to look closer at the numbers. Section 1. A historic political upset. To truly understand the sheer scale of this earthquake, we have to look past those dramatic victory headlines. The unprecedented nature of this result is just staggering. TVK emerged as the single largest party on its very first try, locking down 108 seats. Meanwhile, the incumbent DMK fell to 59, and the AIADMK dropped to 47. And because no single party actually crossed the 118-seat threshold, this exact outcome created Tamil Nadu's first ever hung assembly. The disruption on the ground was so severe that the sitting chief minister, M.K. Stalin, actually lost his own Kollatur constituency. This was a stronghold he had won 3 times consecutively. Meanwhile, the challenger, Vijay, absolutely swept both of the constituencies he contested in, Perambur and Trichy East. From the outside, it looked like an absolute landslide, right? A complete mandate for the newcomer. But was it? Section 2. The illusion of majority. If we do a deep dive into the Association for Democratic Reforms, or ADR, report, it reveals a massive democratic paradox. That narrative of a sweeping popular mandate is actually a bit of an illusion. The absolutely crucial point here is this staggering number, 220. Out of the 234 elected MLAs, 220 of them actually won their seats with less than 50% of the total votes polled. Seriously, let that sink in for a second. Almost every single person sitting in the assembly right now was technically voted against by the majority of their own constituents. Just look at the year-over-year drop to put this in perspective. Back in the 2021 election, the average winner secured about 48.37% of the vote. Fast forward to 2026, and the winning vote share plummeted by almost 10%, dropping to 38.99%. So while the mandate looks decisive on the surface, the math proves that these politicians are ruling by an electoral illusion. They're celebrating mandates they barely scraped by to win, all thanks to severe vote fragmentation. Section 3. The vote split disruptor. So, to crack this case and figure out how TBK used this massive fragmentation to their advantage, we have to follow the trail. Where did the votes actually bleed from? Before the election, everyone, and I mean everyone, assumed that Vijay's TBK would cannibalize the opposition AIADMK's vote base. But the data proves that the fatal blow was actually dealt to the incumbent DMK. In really closely fought urban constituencies, especially in Chennai, which has long been a DMK fortress, TBK completely siphoned off the young urban demographics. They effectively turned comfortable DMK leads into incredibly tight, fragmented contests. And that brings us to the exact mathematical threshold required to flip the state. In a heavily fragmented 3-way race, you don't actually need 50% to win a seat. Realistically, you only need around 30%. TVK's final vote share landed at 34.92%. That was the precise surgical strike needed to walk away with 108 seats, leaving the DMK trailing at roughly 24% and the AIADMK at 21%. Now, remember that historic 85.1% turnout we talked about right at the start? Well, actually, even that was partly a statistical phantom. The percentage was mathematically inflated by a special intensive revision of the electoral rolls right before the election. nearly 70 lakh voters were removed from the rolls. That shrank the overall base from 6.41 crore down to 5.73 crore. And of course, a smaller denominator mathematically pumps up the final percentage, making the surge look far more dramatic than the actual numbers actually suggest.
Section 4. The Digital Campaign Engine.
So the million-dollar question is, how did a 2-year-old party execute this precise mathematical takeover against deeply entrenched Dravidian giants? The answer is they operated a digital machine entirely in the shadows. TVK's strategy was essentially a covert op. Vijay campaigned physically for less than 3 weeks. He held absolutely zero press conferences and gave no major media interviews. Instead, they bypassed those massive traditional rallies completely and opted to weaponize his pre-existing movie fan clubs, turning them into hyper-local WhatsApp and Instagram mobilization cells. By totally avoiding the press and relying heavily on short-form video, Vijay was able to present this completely blank slate, corruption-free alternative to the voters. This digital-first approach perfectly targeted fatigued urban youth, Gen Z, and women, demographics that were way less connected to traditional political narratives and highly receptive to this clean, algorithm-driven promise of change. Section 5. A new coalition government. But this unprecedented digital insurgency left us with a massive cliffhanger. I mean, securing 108 seats is an incredible feat on your first try, for sure. But TVK was still 10 seats short of absolute power. 118. That is the magic number needed to actually form a government and take control of Fort St. George. What followed the results on May 4th was an absolute masterclass in backdoor negotiations. After Stalin resigned on May 5th, the entire state was enveloped in this thick tension and uncertainty. Over the next few days, the Indian National Congress and several left-wing parties fractured their old alliances with the DMK. They agreed to conditionally back Vijay to ensure a stable government, which successfully pushed him over the finish line. He was officially sworn in on May 10th. As we close the file on this unprecedented electoral heist, it leaves us with one chilling, absolute game-changer of a question about the future of global democracies. If a massive, historic political dynasty can be completely dismantled using nothing but fragmented math, targeted smartphones, and an illusion of majority, is the era of traditional political campaigning officially dead? Think about that, and what it actually means for how our leaders will be chosen tomorrow.